They laughed when I took the worst job in town. 5 years later, they understood why 5 years ago. People in my town laughed at me, not the friendly kind of laugh. The kind that happens when someone believes you just made the biggest mistake of your life. I remember the exact moment it started. It was a Monday. Morning. Cold. Gray skies. The kind of morning where even the sun seems unsure if it wants to show up. I was standing in line at Miller's Coffee, the small diner on Main Street where almost everyone in town eventually passed through. Construction workers, teachers, truck drivers, retired farmers. Everyone. And that morning, everyone saw the same thing. The envelope in my hand. Job offer. But not just any. Job. The job. The one nobody wanted. The one people joked about. The one parents warned their kids about when they talked about education and doing something with your life. Garbage collection. Not in the city. With big trucks and clean uniforms. No. This was the private sanitation route that covered the worst parts of the county. Abandoned neighborhoods. Illegal dumping zones. Places most people avoided after dark. Places the city barely acknowledged existed. I could still hear the voice of the man behind the counter when he saw the envelope. Well, I'll be damned. I looked up. He leaned forward slightly. That what I think it is? I nodded. Yeah. He raised his eyebrows. You actually took it? Someone behind me chuckled. Then another. Within seconds, the entire corner booth was watching. One of the guys from high school leaned back in his chair and laughed out loud. Man, you serious? I shrugged. It's a job. He shook his head. No, man, that's not a job. That's where dreams go to die. More laughter. I tried to smile. But inside, it felt heavier than I expected. Because the truth was, they weren't entirely wrong. 5 months earlier, my life looked completely different. I had just turned 26, had a decent job in logistics at a distribution company. 2 towns over. Nothing glamorous, but stable, predictable, the kind of job where you could imagine your life slowly building into something. Apartment, savings, maybe a house eventually. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the company announced they were closing the entire regional office. Automation. New systems. Cost efficiency. Corporate words that basically mean the same thing. You're not needed anymore. 300 people lost their jobs that day. I was one of them. At first, I thought it would be temporary. I had experience, a college degree, good references. I figured I would find something within a few weeks. Then the weeks turned into months. Applications, interviews, emails. That started with, "We regret to inform you." Eventually the savings started shrinking. Rent, car, payment, insurance, groceries, everything adds up faster when money stops coming in. By month 4, I was delivering groceries through an app just to stay afloat. By month 5, I was behind on rent. That was when my landlord knocked on the door one evening. Nice guy, but business is business. You got 2 months? He told me gently. 2 months to figure it out, or leave. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop, scrolling through job listings. That all seemed to say the same thing. Experience required. Position filled. Temporary. Contract. Nothing stable. Nothing real. Then I saw it buried near the bottom of the page. County Sanitation Services route. Assistant needed immediate start. The pay wasn't terrible. Actually better than some of the other jobs I had seen, but there was a reason it stayed open for months. The route. Everyone in town knew about that route. The worst one. The driver who used to run it quit after 3 weeks. Guy before him lasted 4 days. Rumors spread fast in small towns. People said the neighborhoods were dangerous. People said the work was brutal. People said the smell never left your clothes. But when you're staring at eviction notices, your priorities change. I applied that same night. The next morning the phone rang. "You still interested?" the manager asked. I didn't hesitate. "Yes, you start Monday." Which brings us back to that coffee shop, standing in line, holding the envelope, listening to people laugh. One of the older guys in the booth leaned forward and shook his head. "Kid, you went to college for that?" I looked at him. Then I folded the envelope and slid it into my jacket pocket. "No," I said calmly. "I went to college so I could survive moments like this." The diner got quiet for a second. Not because what I said was impressive, but because nobody expected an answer like that. I grabbed my coffee. and walked out. The cold air hit my face as the door closed behind me, and for the first time that morning, I felt strangely calm, because there was something I hadn't told anyone. Something that made that job a lot more interesting than people realized. Something I discovered during the interview. Something that would completely change the way I looked. At that worst job in town, but nobody knew that yet. Not the guys in the diner, not the people laughing, not even my own family, and definitely not the people who would eventually regret laughing at all, because 5 years later, that job would lead me somewhere nobody in that diner could have imagined. And it all started on my first day. At 4:30 in the morning, standing in a freezing parking lot behind a sanitation warehouse, staring at a truck that looked like it had survived 3 wars. That's when I met Frank, the man who had been driving that route for 22 years, the man who had quietly changed the entire direction of my life at the time. I thought he was just another tired guy doing a tough job. I had no idea he was about to teach me something most people spend their whole lives never learning. And the first lesson started with a sentence I'll never forget. Frank looked at me, then at the truck, then back at me again. And he said something that sounded strange at the time. But 5 years later, I finally understood exactly what he meant. The parking lot behind the sanitation warehouse was almost completely dark. The only light came from 2 old yellow lamps hanging above the loading bay doors. They flickered every few seconds, like they were thinking about giving up completely. It was 4:27 in the morning. The air was cold enough that I could see my breath. And standing there in a brand new pair of work gloves that still smelled like rubber and factory plastic, I felt like I had just stepped into a version of life I never imagined for myself. Around me were rows of garbage. Trucks, big, metal, old, some of them looked like they had been on the road longer than I'd been alive. And right in the middle of them stood the one I would be working on. Truck 17. Paint chipped, side panel slightly dented. The company logo faded, almost beyond recognition. It looked less like a machine and more like something that had survived a long fight. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "You, the new guy?" I turned around. The man walking toward me looked like he had stepped straight out of the job itself. Heavy boots, flannel jacket, gray beard, face weathered from years of sun, wind, and early mornings. He carried a thermos in one hand. "Coffee. Definitely coffee." "Yes, sir," I said. He nodded once. "Frank." I shook his hand. His grip was firm. Not aggressive. Just solid. Like someone who had spent decades doing real work. "You ever done this before?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." He studied my face for a moment. Then he looked at the truck. "Well," he said calmly. "You're about to?" He opened the passenger door and climbed inside like someone who had done that exact movement 10,000 times. I followed him. The inside of the truck smelled like oil, metal, and something faintly sour that I assumed was just part of the job. Frank started the engine. The truck roared to life. Loud. Louder than any vehicle I had ever been inside. "You eat breakfast?" he asked over the noise. "No." He handed me the thermos. "Drink." I hesitated. He raised an eyebrow. "You'll need it." I took a sip. Black coffee, strong enough to wake up a cemetery. Frank pulled the truck out of the lot. We rolled slowly toward the highway. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of the engine. Then he glanced at me. "So," he said, "you the guy everyone's talking about?" That made me blink. "What do you mean?" He smirked slightly. "Kid with a college degree who signed up for the worst route in the county." I sighed. "Word travels fast." "Small town," he said. "Everything travels fast." We drove for another few minutes before he spoke again. "Know why nobody wants this route? Because it's the worst one? That's the rumor," he said. Then he looked at me again. "But rumors are usually only half the truth." That sentence stuck in my head. Half the truth, at the time. I assumed he meant the neighborhoods were rough, or the work was harder, or maybe the hours were worse. I had no idea that what he meant went much deeper than that. The sun still hadn't risen when we reached the first stop, an abandoned industrial area. Just outside town, old warehouses, broken windows, graffiti on almost every wall. Frank parked the truck and pulled the lever that activated the back compactor. The machine groaned like a tired animal. "All right," he said. "Lesson 1. He pointed toward a large metal dumpster beside the building. You grab the bins, roll them back here, hook them on the lift. Simple enough. The first bin was heavier than I expected. Not just trash, wood scraps, metal pieces, construction junk. By the time I rolled it to the truck, my arms were already burning. Frank watched quietly, not mocking, not judging Dot, just observing. When the lift finished dumping the container into the truck, he nodded. Good. We drove to the next stop, then the next, then the next. For the first hour, it was just work, lift, dump Dot, repeat, cold air, Dot heavy. Bins. The smell was exactly what you would expect, but something strange happened around the fourth stop. Frank parked beside a small roadside diner that looked like it had been closed for years. There were 2 dumpsters behind the building, but when I opened the first one, I froze. Inside were dozens of perfectly good boxers of packaged food. Canned goods, bread Dot sealed, containers, none of it expired, none of it damaged, just thrown away. Would they dump this? I asked. Frank leaned against the truck. They overordered, he said. Health code says they can't donate it after a certain time. I stared at the food. It was enough to feed several families, so it just gets crushed. Frank shrugged. Usually, then, he said something quietly. But not always. That was when I noticed the back compartment of the truck looked different than I expected. There was a divider, a small storage area separate from the main trash container. I pointed at it. What's that for? Frank looked at me, then at the food, then back at me again. That, he said slowly, is where the other half of the truth begins. He climbed down from the truck and grabbed 2 of the boxers from the dumpster. Help me load these. I hesitated. Isn't that stealing? Frank laughed. No. He pointed at the dumpster. Stealing means taking something someone wants. He lifted another box. This is saving something someone threw away. We filled the side compartment with food, then we closed it. I still didn't understand until we drove 15 minutes farther down the route to a neighborhood I had never been to before. Small houses, some barely standing, rusty fences, broken sidewalks, kids riding old bikes in the street. Frank stopped the truck near a small community building. The paint was peeling, but the door opened as soon as we pulled up. An older woman stepped outside. When she saw Frank, she smiled. Morning? Frank nodded toward the truck. Got a good one today? We unloaded the boxers of food. The woman's eyes widened. Oh my goodness. Then she called inside. Within minutes, several people came out. Parents, kids, grandparents, nobody. Asked questions. Nobody acted surprised. They just started carrying the boxers inside. I stood there watching, confused. Frank leaned against the truck again. We stop here 3 times a week, he said quietly. For years. My brain struggled to catch up, you mean? This job? Yeah, he said. It's a garbage route. He pointed toward the building where families were now unpacking the food. But it's also the biggest supply chain. Nobody in this town notices. Suddenly, everything started clicking together. The extra compartment, the route through struggling neighborhoods, the food that stores and restaurants threw away. How much do you save every week? I asked. Frank shrugged. 2 tons maybe. 2 tons of food that would have been crushed and buried in a landfill. Instead, it fed people, kids, families, entire neighborhoods. I looked at the truck, then at Frank. You've been doing this for 22 years. He nodded. Since before you were probably in middle school. Why doesn't anyone talk about it? Frank smiled slightly. Because nobody respects garbage men. He looked back toward the community center, which makes us invisible. Then, he tapped the side of the truck. And invisible people can get a lot of good work done. I stood there for a long moment, watching families carry food inside, watching kids laugh as they helped move boxers. And suddenly, that job offer didn't feel like rock bottom anymore. It felt like something completely different. Frank climbed back into the driver's seat. You coming? I nodded and climbed into the passenger seat. As we drove toward the next stop, he looked at me. So tell me something, he said. Why'd you really take this job? I stared out the window for a moment. Then I answered honestly, because I was desperate. Frank nodded slowly. That's how most good things start. Then he said something that would stay in my head for the next 5 years. "You think people laughed at you because this job is embarrassing?" He glanced at me. "They laughed because they don't understand it. And 5 years later, they finally would. But not yet. Because the real story of that truck, the one nobody in town saw coming, was only just beginning. And the moment that changed everything happened 3 months later, on a rainy Tuesday morning, when we opened a dumpster behind a supermarket and found something none of us expected. 3 months passed faster than I expected. The routine that once felt strange slowly became normal. Wake up at 3:45 in the morning. Coffee. Cold air. Truck 17 roaring to life before the sun even thought about rising. At first, I thought the job would just be something temporary, something to get me through a rough season of life. But somewhere during those first months, something inside me started shifting. Not in a dramatic way, not overnight, just slowly, quietly. The kind of change you don't notice until one day you realize you're thinking differently about everything. Frank never made big speeches. He didn't talk about purpose or philosophy, but every single day he showed me something about people, about waste, about the invisible systems that run beneath everyday life. Most people never notice what happens to their trash once it disappears. They tie the bag, they drag the bin to the curb, and then it's gone. But after 3 months on that truck, I started seeing something most people never see. Patterns. Entire stories hidden inside what people throw away. Some dumpsters were predictable. Restaurants tossed food constantly. Construction sites dumped wood, metal, broken equipment. But grocery stores were different. Sometimes they threw away thousands of dollars worth of food in one night. Perfectly good food, still sealed, still fresh. It made no sense to me. One rainy Tuesday morning, something happened that changed everything. We pulled behind a large supermarket on the edge of town. The rain had been falling since midnight. Cold, steady, relentless, the kind of rain that makes everything smell stronger. Garbage, especially. Frank parked the truck beside the loading dock. "All right," he said. Same routine. I jumped down from the truck and rolled the first dumpster toward the lift. Heavy. Really heavy. That usually meant two things: either construction debris or food. When I lifted the lid, I froze. Boxers. Dozens of them, all filled with fresh produce. Apples, bananas. Oranges, packaged. Salads. Vegetables still in plastic wrap. I grabbed one of the boxers and opened it. Every apple looked perfect. Bright red. Shiny. "Not a bruise on them, Frank," I called. He walked over slowly, took one look, then whistled quietly. "That's a big one. How can they throw this away?" I asked. He shrugged. "Expiration date coming up." I looked at the label. It expired the next day. "That's insane." Frank leaned against the dumpster. "Welcome to the system." We started pulling boxers out and stacking them near the truck. Within minutes, the pile was huge. Far more than the little community center could handle. I wiped rain from my face. "What do we do with all of it?" Frank didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the growing pile. Then he said something slowly. "You ever notice something?" "What?" He looked toward the street. "Every week we find more food than we can move." I nodded. Double quotes. "Yeah. And every week," he continued, "the food bank in this county runs empty by Thursday." That sentence sat heavy in the rain, because I knew he was right. Everyone in town knew it. Families struggled quietly, rent rising, groceries getting more expensive, and meanwhile, perfect food was being thrown away by the truckload. Frank looked back at the apples, then at me. "What if we stopped thinking small?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He pointed at the pile. "You see a few boxers?" Then he pointed down the road toward town. "I see a supply chain." The rain kept falling, but suddenly my brain started racing. "How much food do you think gets thrown away in the whole county every week?" I asked. Frank smiled. "Now you're asking the right questions." That afternoon, after we finished the route, we didn't go straight back to the warehouse. Instead, Frank drove the truck to a small parking lot behind the community center. We unloaded everything: the apples, the vegetables, the packaged salads. Families showed up within minutes. Word spread fast. People took what they needed, and even after that, there was still food left. I leaned against the truck, exhausted. That was just one store. I said. Frank nodded. Now imagine 30. The idea felt impossible, but also strangely obvious. Why hasn't anyone done this before? I asked. Frank chuckled. Oh, people have tried. What happened? Paperwork, he said. Regulations. Liability. Insurance. He looked at the truck. But garbage trucks. He tapped the metal door. Nobody pays attention to garbage trucks. That night I went home with a thought stuck in my head. If this route wasn't just about collecting trash, what if it was something else entirely? For the next 2 weeks, I started paying closer attention. Every restaurant, every grocery store, every bakery, every warehouse, food, everywhere. Tons of it. Perfectly good. Perfectly usable. Thrown away every day. One night, I sat at my small kitchen table with a notebook. I started writing. Numbers. How many grocery stores in the county? How many restaurants? How many schools? Then I estimated how much food each one threw away weekly. The number at the bottom of the page shocked me. Tens of thousands of pounds every week, enough to feed thousands of people. I stared at the notebook for a long time. Then I thought about the men laughing in the diner months earlier. That's where dreams go to die. I smiled to myself, because suddenly this job didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning of something big. The next morning I showed the notebook to Frank. He flipped through the pages slowly. Then he looked at me. You're serious? I think we can do this. He leaned back in his chair. You know, if we start something like this. He paused. People will notice eventually. I know. And once people notice, he shrugged. They'll either help us or stop us, I said. Dodd-Frank smiled. Exactly. He closed the notebook and handed it back to me. Well, kid, he said. Looks like you didn't just take the worst job in town. He nodded toward the truck outside. You found the most powerful? But neither of us realized how big this was about to become. Because the first real turning point didn't happen with a grocery store, or a restaurant, or even the city. It happened with something much bigger, a major distribution warehouse. Outside town. The kind of place that receives entire truckloads of food every day. And the day we got our first call from that warehouse was the day the entire system began to change. The day people stopped laughing, and the day our little garbage route started becoming something nobody in this county had ever seen before. But the biggest surprise of all would come 5 years later. The same people who laughed at me in that diner would finally understand exactly why I took that job. And by then, it would already be too late for them to laugh. There is a strange moment in life when everything finally slows down, not because the problems disappeared, but because you finally understand them. That moment came for me on a quiet Sunday morning. I was standing outside the warehouse, holding a cup of gas station coffee, watching the sun come up over the highway. The trucks were parked, the doors were closed. The city was still waking up. 5 years earlier, I had walked into that same building feeling like the biggest failure in town. Now I was standing there, knowing something different. Not pride, not victory, just peace. The kind of peace you only earn after surviving something hard. I'd heard footsteps behind me. It was Marcus. He walked over and leaned against the railing next to me. Hard to believe this place used to be falling apart. I smiled. You should have seen it the first week. He laughed. Oh, I heard the stories. We stood there quietly for a moment. Then he said something that stuck with me. You know what the weirdest part is? What? You never acted like this was temporary. He looked at me. You acted like it mattered from day one. I shrugged. Because it did. And that's something most people never do understand. People think meaning comes after success. But the truth is the opposite. Meaning comes first. You treat something like it matters long before anyone else believes it does. And if you keep doing that long enough, eventually, the world starts to believe it too. A few months later, we held a small event at the warehouse. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs, a barbecue grill, and a bunch of people who had been part of the journey. Former workers, new hires, drivers, families, kids, running around between pallets. Someone hung string lights across the loading dock. For the first time, the building didn't feel like a workplace. It felt like a community at one point. Marcus stood up and tapped his cup with a fork. All right, I gotta say something. Everyone quieted down. He pointed at me. 5 years ago, this guy walked into the worst job in town. People chuckled. and we all thought he was crazy. More laughter. But here's the truth. His voice softened. This place exists because he refused to see it the way everyone else did. He looked around the crowd. He saw potential where we saw problems. Then he raised his cup. To the guy who proved that sometimes the worst job in town is just the beginning of the best story. Everyone clapped. I felt my face getting hot. Public attention has never been my thing. But what hit me hardest wasn't the applause. It was the faces. People smiling. People who had steady work now. People whose kids had food on the table because the warehouse stayed open. And I realized something important. 5 years earlier, I thought I was just trying to survive. But somewhere along the way, the job had stopped being about me. A few weeks after that event, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, from my father. We hadn't talked much during those 5 years. Not because of anger, just distance. Different ways of seeing the world. I sat at the kitchen table and opened it. The letter was simple. Son, I saw the article about your company in the local paper. I didn't understand your decision back then. Truth is, I still don't fully understand it. But I see what you've built, and I'm proud of the man you became while doing it. I read that line 3 times. Proud of the man you became. Not proud of the company. Not proud of the money. The man. Sometimes the validation we wait for doesn't come when we expect it. Sometimes it comes years later, quietly in a single sentence. The truth is, life never suddenly becomes easy. The warehouse still had bad weeks. Trucks still broke down. Orders still got delayed. Some nights, I still stayed late, fixing problems. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't trying to prove people wrong. I was simply doing work that mattered, and that difference changes everything. Because when you're no longer chasing validation, you start building things that last. One afternoon, I was walking through the warehouse when I noticed a young guy stacking boxers near the loading dock. New hire, maybe early 20s. He looked nervous, like someone still trying to figure out where he fit in the world. I walked over. How's the first week going? He shrugged. Honestly, yeah. Better than I expected. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Then he asked something that caught me off guard. Is it true you used to work this same job? I smiled. Yeah, started right there. I pointed to the same spot where he was standing. His eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously? He looked around the building. You ever think about doing something bigger? I thought about that for a second. Then I told him the truth. This is bigger. He looked confused, and I understood why. When you're young, you think bigger means fame, money, recognition. But sometimes bigger means something quieter, something deeper. Bigger means building something that gives people stability. Bigger means creating a place where others can grow. Bigger means turning a job people avoid into a place people depend on. And that kind of success rarely shows up on social media, but it changes lives. A few days later, I was driving home after a long shift. Traffic was slow. The sun was setting behind the buildings. And I thought about that moment, 5 years earlier, when people laughed at my decision. At the time, it felt humiliating. Now it felt necessary. Because if everyone had supported me right away, if everyone had believed in the idea, I might not have fought so hard for it. Sometimes, doubt from others forces you to discover belief in yourself, and once you find that, you carry it for the rest of your life. Looking back now, I realize something funny. People always ask what the secret was. What strategy? What business plan? What breakthrough moment? But the real answer is boring and simple. I just showed up every day, even when it was embarrassing, even when it was exhausting, even when nobody believed it mattered. And eventually, those small days stacked on top of each other. Until one day, people looked around and realized something had changed. 5 years ago, people laughed when I took the worst job in town today. That same job pays for mortgages, college, tuition, groceries, medical bills, and 100 other quiet things that make life a little less chaotic. But the biggest change wasn't the warehouse, it was me. Because the truth is, sometimes the worst job in town isn't a step backwards. Sometimes it's the exact place where your real life begins. And if you stay long enough, work hard enough, and believe long enough, one day the same people who laughed will finally Understand why you never left.